Um, oh, okay. Looks like we're recording now. Awesome. Thank you, Janine. First of all, the EPA did send 2 response letters to the CAG since our last meeting. So we had a response letter that we sent to your letter regarding it back in November. I believe the letter was dated November 15th to EPA regarding PFAS at the site. Our response to that was sent, as well as a response to the TAG appeal letter, which was sent in December. So both of those were sent since the last time that we've met. The only other update I have is that there is a new fact sheet on the 5th 5-year review for the site, which is now posted on the website, on EPA's website. As you might have noticed, we have kind of a skeleton crew tonight from EPA. And we have myself, obviously the community involvement coordinator for the site, and then Mike, who is representing, works on behalf of EPA and the WSDs. I just wanted to mention that due to the nature of the agenda tonight, we don't have our technical folks on the line here. That's really all I have for updates. Mike, you're muted.
Yep. Bonnie, I'll have you up next for updates, and then we'll go to CDPHE for the site assessment update. But Bonnie, you first.
Okay, the first thing I have is an update from the CAG, is that we're very sad EPA is not here tonight because they feel that, from what I understand, EPA is of the opinion that talking about technologies that might clean up the chemicals at Lowry Landfill Superfund site and help relieve our concerns about so many chemicals remaining above our 4 main aquifers is not pertinent to what the federal government, EPA, deals with. We're really very sad about that. If you remember, in one of our very first meetings, we asked the WSDs if they would be willing to work with us to help come to some conclusions and to determine what could relieve us of the worry we have about the 138 million gallons of chemicals that remain at the site and threaten our aquifers. And so we're asking tonight again, please, for EPA and the WSDs to please consider our concerns. And when we come forward with technologies that might be able to do a job on neutralizing, destroying, or removing the chemicals from the site, please give consideration to the fact that it's an important issue and EPA is the only one that can approve this activity. And for EPA to not be involved seems negligent to us. We have been interviewing some companies who may be able to come in and do some work on helping us with our issues. We want to learn about these technologies, and we'd like to make a decision as a group and towards what might be good to use at this site so that we aren't living with this constant threat. So that's one update. We are continuing with that. We have been interviewing some companies. We have a company that does do 1,4-dioxane work, and we would like to be able to discuss it at our future meetings, and we would like EPA to be interested in them as well. As far as the responses to us, we're not ready to give an opinion on that. We're going to have a work study meeting where we can talk about EPA's responses to us. And since they aren't here tonight, because evidently what we're talking about tonight isn't pertinent to EPA, we aren't ready to answer yet, and we will as soon as we have a work study session and when we know EPA will be interested again. So I think that's about all that we have on our plate. Tom, do you have anything you might want to add? Okay, Tom is shaking his head no.
Yep. Okay.
Mike, I just
Thanks,
had
Bonnie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. Mike, I just wanted to jump in real quick and just respond. I hear you. I want to remind you that I'm the community involvement coordinator for EPA. And also, we do see it a little bit differently. We see the agenda tonight and we don't consider it pertinent to the remedial program at EPA and therefore to Lowry Landfill Superfund site. You are, of course, welcome to, obviously, your opinions, free country. You're welcome to meet anytime without us. But we needed to make a decision on dedicating resources to something that we don't consider to be pertinent to the remedial program. And like I said, difference of opinion, and everyone's welcome to it. But I do want to encourage you that you're welcome to meet at any time on your own to discuss these kinds of things. But we cannot continue to dedicate resources to things that aren't pertinent, what we don't consider to be pertinent to the remedial aspects of this site, and or could be challenging the remedy at the site. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Meg. We do understand that. And we are disappointed. But let's hope some things maybe will progress at some point. And thank you for making it very clear to everyone that's new to this. We appreciate it.
Okay, Gun Club Estate site assessment update from CDPHE and any other updates you all want to add at this stage before the presentation.
Okay, so for Gun Club Estates, our site assessment program is planning to begin domestic well sampling in Gun Club Estates in the next 2 weeks. We've actually been out there already getting some access agreements, or at least initiating that process. Pending access, the list of wells to be sampled includes those wells that were referred to us for sampling by EPA. The well sampling effort, and I've mentioned this before, is part of the preliminary assessment site inspection process that we run at the state. It's wholly separate from Lowry Landfill. And so I wasn't planning on getting into specific details on that program in the Lowry Landfill CAG meeting. If you do have specific questions on the Gun Club Estate sampling, Shannon Bauman, who is our community involvement coordinator handling that project, is on the meeting tonight. And maybe Shannon, you can put your contact information in the chat. You can reach out to her with any questions that you have on the Gun Club Estate sampling, and we can address them through that program rather than in the CAG meeting. I do have one other update on the CDPHE side. Some of you may have noticed Dustin's not on the meeting, and that is because Dustin has been promoted to, he is now the new Federal Facilities Remediation and Restoration Unit Leader. So he is moving over into that position. And so I will be manning the ship for this project until we get his position backfilled. And so we're hoping to do that soon. And as soon as we have a new person in that position, we will introduce that person at a CAG meeting. That's it for me.
Good. All right. Since you have the floor, Colleen, let me just let you keep it. And you could do some introductions and we'll get rolling.
Yeah, I would be happy to. I would love to introduce David Danny. He is our emerging contaminants coordinator. At
Wait.
Oh.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Excuse me. On the Gun Club well testing, we were expecting more than just we're going to do it in 2 weeks. I asked a couple of questions in the email I sent you on what is this? It's what's called investigation. It was called all different kinds of things, and I'm trying to coordinate with what kind of a regulation this is. We would like to know the reason for CDPHE testing. We would like to know, we know you've contacted some of the residents there. I've talked with them. What will this lead to after the testing is done? Will there be any hope that we can have some yearly monitoring like we have on the 2 houses down on Jewel after that point, so we can monitor what's happening with the chemicals from the site. We'd like a little bit more information on what's going to be done and what isn't going to be done and what kind of investigation is this. I noticed you were very careful in the letter to state that we're not looking for a source. And I'm just wondering if you do come across something like 1,4-dioxane, what is going, if you're not looking for a source, what will you do with that information?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this is part of what's called the site assessment program, and both EPA and CDPHE have a site assessment program. And we do work under that site assessment program under a grant from EPA. And so this is what is called the site inspection phase, or sometimes also referred to as the site investigation stage. We've already collected a preliminary we've conducted a preliminary assessment at the site. So that was the original records review, walking out at the site, that kind of thing. So that was completed, I think it was last year or something like that.
Did you walk Colleen, excuse me, did you walk the properties? What are you saying?
No, we did not go onto people's properties, just generally, you know, a view of the community from the roadside kind of thing. And this is, again, part of the CERCLA Preliminary Assessment Site Inspection Program. It's a CERCLA program, but it is not part of the Superfund site. So it's completely separate from Lowry Landfill. It's not connected at all to Lowry Landfill. Decisions made under this program will not consider what's going on at Lowry Landfill. It's a separate program that we investigate properties throughout the state for potential issues. So at this stage, we're just in the initial investigation because there were concerns brought up by the community. And that first step of sampling, which is going to be going on here soon, will inform whether additional work will be done, and that decision will be made in conversation with EPA's site assessment program. And that, again, that program is completely separate from the Lowry Landfill Superfund site. So those discussions will happen depending on the outcome of the sampling. If we don't find anything, there would be no reason to do additional work. If we find something, then we have to confer with EPA site assessment to determine next steps.
Okay, that's all good information. Now, how will the community be kept involved in your findings and where you're going with your investigation?
Yeah. So once we get the results back, we will write a report, a site inspection report. And once that's been approved by the EPA site assessment team, that becomes public. And we will let you know when that happens.
Will you keep in touch with the people whose wells?
Yes,
you
they
were
will get
testing?
results. They will get results. That is part of the process. So they'll get
Okay.
results of our samples.
Okay, so am I hearing you say that if you don't find anything there, which I tell you, we all hope you don't, but does that say that at that point in time, you're not going to be at all concerned about those wells from this time on?
That is the way the site assessment program works. It's not a continuing monitoring program. It's a go out and collect a sample program. If we find something of concern, we might do follow-up sampling. If we don't, that's typically the end of the process.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions on this? I'm flabbergasted. Margie? Unmute.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm just curious, when you say that you will pass your results along to the EPA and they'll take a look at them, will the CAG get to see them? Or will we just have to go with whatever it is that EPA
Again,
decides?
let me make this clear. This is not a Lowry Landfill program. So it's not automatically something we would bring to the Lowry Landfill CAG. We will be engaging with the Gun Club Estates community because it's their wells, right? So that's our community of focus. To the extent somebody in this meeting lives in Gun Club Estates, absolutely you'll be informed. If there's a reason to involve the rest of the community outside of Gun Club Estates, if there's a potential concern, then our community involvement people will do that. But this forum, this Lowry Landfill CAG, is not the appropriate place to be bringing information related to a separate process. And so to the extent that I've already gone into detail tonight is more than we would normally do for any of our site assessment projects. And the fact that I happen to be working on both is the only reason you're hearing this. So just, keep that in mind. Because I'm on Lowry Landfill and I'm also running the site assessment part, that's the only reason you're getting the level of detail you're getting in this meeting. We always are open to talking to a community about anything we do, just not this forum. And that's all I'm trying to get across.
Sounds like it's the state's way of saying we're separated from the CAG and the Lowry landfill Superfund side. And even if we find something, it's not necessarily linked to the site. We're just going to do this as a courtesy for the neighborhood. And if we find something, it's not linked to the site, and EPA has nothing to do with it.
What we're saying is if we find something, the next step would be to figure out what its source is. We can't make assumptions about what it is. And that's not appropriate to assume it would be linked to one particular project where there are multiple potential sources in the area.
Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah, so again, an update here as a courtesy, but the forum will be the Gun Club Estates neighbors and the community outreach directly from CDPHE. I'm going to move to Danny, because again, we're moving into territory not Lowry landfill. So David, I want to give you the floor.
Are you not going to let
Joan
Joan?
had her hand up. Are we not going to listen to her?
Yeah, no, I was trying to respect Colleen's concerns that we're in the wrong venue.
Yeah. I am not going to give any more detail on this site assessment program in this meeting. If you would like to have follow-up, we can arrange that separately.
Okay, David.
When?
You can reach out to Shannon and she can arrange something. She put her information in the chat.
Got it. We
And
know
again-
Shannon's information. Thank you very much, Colleen.
You're welcome.
Okay, David, over to you.
I will thank you all for letting me join you all this evening. I'm really excited to just talk to you about some work that we're doing with these PFAS contaminants and a new grant program that will allow for testing of groundwater and surface water for free. So I put together a little bit of a presentation just to kind of share some of this information with you, and wasn't quite sure if everyone was even familiar with what these chemicals are. So there'll be a bit of an introduction. And like Colleen said, I'm the Emerging Contaminants Coordinator with the State Health Department. All right, let me share my screen really quick. All right. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to start off with just what is PFAS for those that aren't familiar with it and why we care, and then just kind of what's happening federally to address PFAS. There's a lot going on. It's definitely a hot topic showing up in the news and is a top priority for us at the State Health Department. So kind of what's happening federally and then what we're doing locally just within Colorado to address PFAS contamination. And through some PFAS bills that have passed, we're able to launch this grant program that we're really excited about, and it'll provide some resources for testing and then as well to address where we do find contamination and impacts, especially to drinking water. So for those that aren't familiar, PFAS, we like to create acronyms for just really long kind of substances that we find, but it stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And so these substances were created in the lab, so they don't naturally exist. And they were designed decades ago, really to kind of resist heat, stains, grease, water, a lot of stuff, anything you can throw at it. And because of these valuable properties that we all like, they've showed up in just a lot of our everyday products. So, everything from fast food wrapping to different carpets, clothing we wear, there's a lot of different things that we are finding PFAS in. And in Colorado, where we've kind of found sites with contamination where we've gone in and worked, especially to address impacts to drinking water. A lot of it's been due to where we find PFAS in firefighting foams. And these are foams that are specially designed for fuel fires. So this isn't in stuff that you would see coming out of airplanes and forest fires, but these are designed for planes that may catch on fire or something that's fuel related, where you want to put out the fire. And then there's kind of a special blanket to make sure that it stays out. Because of these properties, they're essentially forever chemicals. And so you see that come up. And the reason for that is what we're finding is once they're in the environment, the way they were designed, they don't break down easily. So they do kind of cycle through the environment. And because of all of the products and that they are in, essentially probably everyone in this meeting has some level of PFAS in their blood right now. And the main area of focus for us is really addressing where we have impacts to drinking water. And the reason for that is we've done studies partnering with the Center for Disease Control, checking blood levels in impacted areas near Peterson Air Force Base. And what we found is if you have higher levels in drinking water, then you're going to have higher levels in your blood, possibly up to 10 times higher. So depending on the PFAS compound. And PFAS in general, it's a family of thousands of compounds. So we're still learning more about these every day. And the reason we're concerned is there's just a lot of health studies out there. A lot more research is being done just on, what these could do to us. And so because of that, the EPA did put together a health advisory at 70 parts per trillion for 2 of these compounds, PFOA and PFOS. And so there's a lot of resources kind of being put together and to address this problem, and just kind of on a national level. And a lot of this is being spearheaded by EPA. And they will be regulating 2 of these compounds of concern, PFOA and PFOS, in drinking water. So in fall of 2023, we're going to see a draft rule. And then in about a year, we're going to see a final rule to regulate these in drinking water. And then starting in 2023, all of our community water systems that serve over 3,300 people and a handful of smaller systems are going to have to monitor for pretty much every PFAS we can test for as part of an EPA program. And all of this data will be available to the public. So this is all the systems in Colorado, but also all the ones in other states as well. And they're updating kind of how we dispose of PFAS properly to ensure that we're not contaminating nearby communities when these are moved off, possibly for incineration, or if you take them to a landfill or somewhere else. We're looking at just kind of how you can properly dispose of them. And then also possible future kind of regulations under kind of CERCLA and cleanup. And the Department of Defense is looking to completely phase out of using PFAS foams at their bases. And this fall, our airports will also be phasing off. So there's a lot of research going into finding a suitable replacement where during an emergency, there's something that actually has kind of a seal of approval of this will actually put out one of these fuel fires if needed to save lives. So that's where a lot of research is going. And as we're finding these show up in consumer products, we're seeing them being phased out from these products. And that as we learn more, and spills, are reported to the EPA's toxic release inventory. And there's a lot of research being done that we're involved with as well on the kind of a national level on just what the health and environmental effects are, different treatments, the replacement foams I mentioned, test methods, so we can test for more of these. There's a lot going on. John, I see you've got a question or your hand raised.
Yeah, my question is, this PFAS, when it gets into the human body, does the human body pass any of it, or is it accumulative and it never leaves the body?
A little bit of both, actually. So it does kind of accumulate, through exposure. But what we're finding is as it does break down in your body, and so over time, as your exposure lessens, the levels in your blood also go down.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
So you got your mic on. Don't know if you have a question or if your mic's just on.
Yeah, feel free. If you do have a question, just raise your hand. I'll be sure to see it, and we can kind of chat about it. So we do have an action plan for PFAS at our health department, and the biggest things are really to just reduce exposure and then prevent further contamination. So this is just a little sketch of kind of, PFAS is made, it ends up getting into our environment, and then we're eventually exposed to it. So really what we're trying to tackle is minimizing all of these arrows or completely removing them altogether to reduce our exposure. And Bridget, I see you've got your hand up.
Oops. Thank you very much. I was wondering if you could address PFAS and biosolids as a product of the wastewater treatment. Thank you. If there's not an interest, or if you're not prepared, that's fine.
No, that's a great question. So there's a lot of research happening right now to better understand PFAS in biosolids and then kind of what they mean for exposure. So, kind of over here, you've got the waste infrastructure. So you've got it, and I'll talk more about kind of discharges to state waters, but then you also have a portion through the waste stream kind of go in through the biosolids that can then eventually be land applied. And so there's a lot that we're trying to better understand about that and possible exposure. So there's tons of research, and part of it is, how are you land applying them? What the soil and aquifer conditions? What are you growing? We found like leafy greens will absorb more PFAS than other vegetables and things where they won't really show up. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to better understand to know what does PFAS and biosolids mean, and then what, is there an exposure through that, and what levels would then kind of equate to that exposure. So there's a lot happening on that level to get that information. Does that help, Bridget?
Yes, I was reading about dairy farms in Maine where biosolids were applied, and they found the PFAS in the milk and had to shut the dairies down. It's just everywhere, as you pointed out. It's just a mess. So thank you very much for everything you guys are trying to do.
Yeah, and we've been in touch with Maine. That was kind of a special condition where they had like paper pulp and stuff that was heavily kind of laced with PFAS already that was going. So we've kind of looked at that. Do we, doesn't appear like we would have that going on in Colorado, but we're still just trying to get as much information as we can and learn from other states that have done this. So thanks for bringing that up. Looks like there's another hand.
Yeah, Paula, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, is there any airborne component to these chemicals, or are they all soil and water transferred in that regard?
Yeah, the biggest concern is the water, and from, they're trying to get some kind of methods to better look at what could be in the air. And from what I've seen where states have looked at air, what they're doing is seeing, as it may go up in the air from certain manufacturers of PFAS, where we don't have any of these in Colorado, but things that could be released off the stacks from a manufacturing plant, they're actually doing kind of testing near that to see what then gets deposited into the soil and then into the groundwater. So that's kind of how they're looking at some of it through the air, but there's a lot more that we're trying to better understand about how to test them in air and in exposure there.
To
Margie,
continue-
oh, sorry, Paula.
I just wanted to ask a little bit further, because you mentioned it being a drinking water standard. What about the water that runs through, like, our Murphy Creek? Pardon me, my dog is pretty anxious here. The water that runs through Murphy Creek and the water that Murphy Creek and the city parks use for, I know that Karen Hancock has clarified this for us, but does it volatilize if that water is spread throughout the community for watering reasons or through streams and waterways?
Yeah, and I'll get to that. So there is an opportunity if you are interested in testing that water, we can look at PFAS levels in that water and see what they are. You know, we haven't really seen anything where there's like a concern through like dermal exposure. I mean, the biggest thing we're concerned with is really if that water is used for drinking. And then we're also looking at levels if that water is used for irrigation. So those are the two things we are looking at for exposure through water. And so we do have an opportunity that I'll talk about later to test that water if there's interest.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So Margie, jump in, and then if you've already asked your question and your hand is still up, if you could just bring your hand down using your button. So Margie, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not expecting any definitive response here, and I'm not expecting any great detail, but my question is, it seems like we always find out about this kind of stuff after the fact. Aren't there any agencies that are supposed to be looking into these kinds of things prior to letting everybody just start using this stuff?
Yeah, and that's a good question, I think, for EPA about how that happens. There has been changes, I know, to better look at products or things, or for new chemicals that are kind of getting introduced, that kind of the drinking water sampling that's going to be required by EPA starting in 2023 is a process to look at contaminants that may be of concern, just to get more information to see if are they out there, at what levels, is it something we may need to regulate? And so it's through those processes that we originally found out about PFAS through one of those cycles of monitoring, and now we're going to get more information through another cycle. But that's one of the processes where we do find out kind of on what's out there with some of these things that aren't regulated and could they be of concern. So in 2020, we did do a statewide drinking water sampling project. And this is where we did receive $500,000 in state emergency funds to allow our drinking water providers to voluntarily sign up to have their water tested for PFAS. And this is the actual treated water that someone would be receiving out of their tap. And you can see kind of where this is a graph of kind of where all these systems landed in the testing. And this is all available, this information, on our website. And you can individually look up each water system that participated on what levels are there. So you can see where you get your water and what those levels are. So you can see, comparing against the EPA health advisory of 70 parts per trillion, kind of with those two compounds, the blue bars, our highest systems were between 20 and 30 parts per trillion. And then if you added up all 18 PFAS compounds that we tested for, most of which we don't have health information on, that's kind of the red bar of what those levels are. I did ask, and it sounds like everyone, if you're served by a drinking water provider, it's Aurora. For this, I saw that Aurora's on this call, and they did participate in this 2020 sampling project. And I don't know if you wanted to chime in, Aurora. I'm happy to share those results.
Yeah, please.
If you wanted to do that.
No, please go ahead. That's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
And David, you do have one more question from Joan.
Yes, Joan. Or I guess actually, Joan, before I get to that, if I could just share Aurora's results, and then that'd be a good spot to jump in. So Aurora did test their treated water that you receive through your taps. And they had one sample that came back as non-detect. And then they had one sample that came back for PFOA and PFOS combined at 5 parts per trillion. So that's kind of just like right at this threshold right here. So that's where that end. There'll be a lot more monitoring for these compounds in the future. So we'll have more information. And Joan, did you have a question or comment?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Thanks. Well, I guess PFAS concerns have been around since the
Get your
60s.
water?
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, there's some other, we just have one mic on. So Sonia, if you could mute your mic, there you go.
Okay, so I was just interested, I'm really, really excited that you're focusing on PFAS and questioning it. It's everywhere. It isn't just the drinking water. It is absolutely being found in drinking water, soil, near landfills, and water, fire extinguishers. You know, that list is pretty phenomenal. Focusing on water is it. But what's going on nationwide is a lot more aggressive than Colorado right now. When we are the #1 state, isn't that right? #1 state for having the highest number of sites. And again, there's landfills, incineration. Incineration is being found not to work. Yes, it is in the air. They found it. There was a major investigation in Maine regarding aerial spraying of pesticide. So there's been aerial spraying, and their concern lastly was the big concern a lot of people have are that it's in the blood and that children are the most vulnerable right now. And I just want to say thank you for addressing this, but the picture's big. It's not just in the drinking water, in the wastewater, it's in everything right now. That's an exaggeration a bit, but find me something where it's not. We're finding it in just in places nobody would believe we're finding it. So it is something to look at. And I would certainly think that this particular site, Lowry Landfill, I think they ought to be testing that for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joan. And I'm excited to at least share kind of what we're doing at a state level with that. And then this opportunity where we're going to get a whole lot more information. You brought up kind of potential sites, known sites, and most of these things we have no information on. And we have an opportunity that I'm going to share to actually allow for testing statewide for anyone that could be near one of these even potential sites where we have no information to be able to test.
David, could I interrupt just real quick? I apologize. I didn't mean to do that, but I wanted to make sure, even a couple of years ago, I asked a toxicologist in Colorado, where are we testing fish? You know, with the old coal burning plants, we ended up with a lot of mercury in our, rivers and streams, et cetera. And I've had to ban people from streams and et cetera and fish. And they said that Golden was doing some fish sampling and we're going to get us some results soon. And they're finding some of the most phenomenal levels, in fish, et cetera. And I just wanted to mention that again. Do you know, David, if anything is surfaced on that fish? Thank you.
I'm not sure. We didn't check fish for the Golden, but I am actually going to share. We did do a pilot study to test PFAS in fish. So we are looking at sources, exposures other than drinking water. And we did partner with Colorado School of Mines and others, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, to do fish testing.
Well, I was referred to the toxicologist. Our state toxicologist, can't think of her name, but anyway.
Christy Richardson.
That's it.
So
she said we would have results because all over the country they're finding this issue. Buckley was a shock to see how much PFAS was in the groundwater, even on site, and nobody really has addressed that. So I looked at a lot of the military bases, and it is a shock. It is definitely a shock, and but they've known about it since the 60s. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll get in because this information is all going to be available where you can see, and they are doing offsite testing at Buckley. Should I move on?
You got one more question, and then let's move on. So Bonnie, do you have something for now?
Yeah, David, I appreciate this presentation. It's very helpful. I don't want to put you on the spot, but when we're talking about this and you say we can ask for testing, We have asked the state and EPA to do some tests at Lowry landfill and offsite on the offsite plume. And the EPA, I'm not going to go into the letters right now. I haven't had a good chance to review them, but EPA at one time said that they don't need to yet because there's no MCL or MDL. And the state hasn't really told us. They said that they will work with the EPA on this since the plume comes from the Lowry landfill Superfund site. We do have absolutes that there is a source of PFAS and PFAS at the site, and we want testing done to find out to what degree. Is it difficult for the community to get the agencies to take a look at it for us? Because we would like to know now, if there's an issue, we would like to find a way to address the contamination in the plume, or we don't even know if it's coming out of the water treatment plant at the site, which then goes into the city of Aurora sewers and then is used, I believe, if I'm not wrong, to irrigate the zoo and parks and so on and so forth. What we'd like to know is it there? That's first and foremost, and then have a discussion on what we can do about it if it's there. If it's not, we'll be thankful. We got enough problems as it is. So not putting you on the spot, we have asked for it. What is our next, what can we do next to get people to understand? We just need to know if it's there. So if it is there, we can start making plans to address it.
Yeah, thanks, Lonnie. And I'm going to get into that in just a couple slides
Okay,
on the sampling, what the sampling opportunities look like to get
Okay.
more information.
that's good.
Yeah, thanks.
you.
And you mentioned, you know, what's going into the wastewater treatment plants that then's leaving, and that kind of fits in with this slide. We are one of the only states that are really looking at PFAS levels in discharges to state waters, to groundwater and to surface water. And we do have a policy that's in place that allows us on any discharge, you know, that's permitted, if there's the likelihood of PFAS in that discharge, to have it, to have them monitor for PFAS. And it's 25 different compounds. And then based on the levels in that discharge, we do have guidelines for setting permit limits. And so we have done that. This is all public information. So I'll share a link at the end of this presentation on where you can go and you can see who's monitoring for PFAS, what are those levels, and then who has discharge permit limits in place. So all of this is available to the public, and there's a little sheet on how to kind of access that information for that. And you can see just kind of the bottom of this slide just shows what we're kind of looking for, where there is some health information out there, and the levels that we're kind of looking at. And the first one's kind of that EPA health advisory with another compound mixed in it, but they're based on kind of how toxic it is for the level, and then what kind of that end health effect concern is. So just some additional state efforts that we're doing. So anytime we do find high levels of PFAS from sampling, from a Department of Defense base, from a discharge, from these things, we do go in and look at, are there private wells in the area? Are there public water systems with intakes or groundwater sources in these areas? Is the water used for irrigation? And when there is a potential risk, we do partner with the local public health agency. So I see Tri-Counties on this. We've worked with them quite a bit to do sampling of private wells in Adams County. We've partnered with Summit County to test wells near Frisco. And then we've partnered with Boulder County to test a bunch of private wells near some fire stations that found higher levels of PFAS. And so, you know, we are able to go out and test private wells, and then through partnering with EPA Region 8, they now have the ability at their lab, which is located out at the Federal Center, to test for PFAS. So we can run out and have them test samples for us free of charge. So that's something that we have available, and we are working with our Colorado Rural Water Association where we can help all of our public water systems with source water protection and look for PFAS. We're putting together a statewide map that's going to be available to the public of all of the test results kind of out there. So that's something that's in the works. It's very exciting. So you won't kind of have to comb through different resources on our website. It'll all just be kind of in one place for you. In big picture, we're looking at combining other kind of potential vulnerabilities, like, well, what's, how does the groundwater move? What kind of aquifer, soil, and potential known sources, everything that was kind of brought up earlier, putting into one vulnerability map where someone can see, like, okay, here's where I live. Should I think about testing? Could I be at risk? And so that's kind of a next step that we're looking at putting together. And this is using some cutting edge modeling and stuff that's recently come out. And we are looking at PFAS through other sectors. So agricultural, recreational, we did do a fish study with Parks and Wildlife and School of Mines. And we're just finishing up kind of the evaluation and releasing that information to the public from that finding, from at least that study. So we are looking at other stuff. Someone mentioned pesticides. We have been evaluating what pesticides and do we have that potential through the packaging and things here in Colorado. So we are looking at other sectors. And then kind of preventing new contamination. There's been a lot of bills that have passed to prevent kind of releases from the firefighting foams. So these are the foams that with PFAS designed for fuel fires. And, right now, fire departments and pretty much everyone except airports and oil refineries are no longer able to purchase PFAS foam. And then there's also a ban on any kind of training using that foam. If you're testing with it, which could be an aircraft hangar, there's strict rules to make sure all of that's captured and contained, so there's no release to the environment. And then we did launch a take-back program to actually pay all of our fire departments and support them to get off of PFAS foam. So we're paying them to take all the foam they have with PFAS, take it out of service. And then when we find out from EPA how we can properly dispose of it, we're going to pick it up and dispose of it for them. And we're actually paying the fire departments to do this so they can actually completely switch to a PFAS-free foam. And the response from this has been tremendous. The fire departments are thrilled they don't want to be using this stuff and they're pumped to be able to get off it. And we're the only state right now that's actually doing a buyback to support them to make a switch to a PFAS-free foam. And then this is the last slide. So this is kind of, the main focus is we do have a grant program that we're able to set up through a PFAS cash fund. And this PFAS cash fund really is kind of generated by the movement of fuel in our state. So on kind of a truck that moves through with fuel, there's a $25 fee with that. That gets put into a PFAS cash fund that's capped at 8 million. This is supporting our take back program that I mentioned. And the big thing that this is doing is allowing us to launch a grant program. And so we can actually now award grants for sampling PFAS in groundwater and surface water. So this is, available for, you can test for free private wells, public water systems, our wastewater treatment plants, counties, nonprofit organizations. All these different entities can sign up for testing free of charge using this grant money. And where we find impacts, we do have money set aside for emergency assistance to support those impacted communities. So in the case of private wells, if you do test and you find levels that, that are above that EPA health advisory, or if that information gets updated, we have new levels we're working with, there's money that we can actually support folks with kind of at-home systems, an under sink treatment system, so you can remove the PFAS from your water. So there is that support. If we find it in a, with our public water systems, there is money to help them with infrastructure to provide treatment to remove the PFAS there. So those are kind of the bins of money. And I copied a little shot that you'll see on our screen when you go to our website of, where you can go to get testing if you have a private well. So that's what's so neat about this opportunity is what I mentioned on the other slide is we find a hot spot for PFAS. And then the next step is, well, what is the exposure to drinking water or irrigation? And then we look to do additional testing. What this grant gives us the opportunity to do is just go right in and look at the actual exposure happening at private wells and in our water systems. So through this, there's the opportunity for everyone in this area, living in this area with a private well to sign up, kind of using this little link that'll just ask, what is your address, and just some contact information. And then that'll get you in for free testing. And we have a contractor that can help support sample collection if someone's looking for that support, and all the testing and analysis is taken care of through this grant program. So this would be the biggest ask I have in this meeting is if you could please let everyone know in these areas through just the resources and outreach you have to let them know about this program so they can sign up, especially if they have, if they have a private well. It looks like Paula, you had a question?
Yes, I do. Am I to understand from what you have given us that there are effective ways to treat the water that contains these toxins? Or is that something that is yet to happen?
Yes, yep. So right now, where we find PFAS, and we have had impacted drinking water providers in Colorado, activated carbon and ion exchange are the two main treatments that we see kind of on a large scale for these contaminants. And if you do find them and you have a private well, an under sink reverse osmosis system is what we're suggesting. And the main reason for that technology is that it'll pretty much completely remove all PFAS out of the water. So it's kind of this ultimate barrier. So those technologies do exist, and we can support individuals and water systems impacted through this grant program.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So David, there are a few things rolling in the chat. One is I'll stick with the PFAS stuff first, and then there's an additional topic. So I don't know if you can see the chat yourself. This is from Sonia asking about oil and gas and airports and where there are exclusions to the limitations on using PFAS going forward.
So PFAS I just opened the chat on my screen. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I have just kind of a link that we can share later of how to access our website. So everything I mentioned, you can get more info on our website, but I'm going to stop sharing so I can better see the chat. So let's see, the first one was with airports.
Yeah. And oil and gas.
So right now with the airports, they're required right now to use kind of a military approved foam right now. And so right now, the only ones that are approved that's called like a mil spec do contain PFAS. And there's a ton of research being done by EPA, DOD, and others to kind of find a suitable replacement. And as soon as that happens, the airports are going to be immediately moving off of this foam. And that could be, in about a year's time. And until then, talking with DIA and others, they're all well aware of the concerns with PFAS and are minimally kind of using them, except in extreme emergencies. And then we're actually one of the only states, we kind of copied Michigan, but we did provide all our airports with equipment so they can actually do the required federal testing without actually releasing any PFAS from that testing. So that's, the airports are using it still, but they're aware of the concerns and are minimizing those releases. I think oil and gas was something that was brought up. And so right now, through this grant program, we're hoping to just get information wherever we can, near oil and gas sites, if people have private wells and that. We have done quite a bit of testing of our public water systems, the water providers in Weld County, and some of these where we have a lot of oil and gas activity. And we really haven't seen levels of concern show up in those water sources, but we do just want to get a lot more information from anyone living near any of these sites, just so we can better understand if there is a possible exposure from them. And it was brought up too, the oil and gas, our site shows the most potential based on a lot of it's based on the oil and gas sites. And in our state, there's just the requirements are different, where we do have a lot more oil and gas things registered in our site than a state like Texas, California, and some of these others. So it doesn't mean we have just a lot more oil and gas than Texas and some of these other states. It's just how some of the reporting happens and how sites get identified. And I can get more info if there's interest there. I'm not totally familiar with it. But that is something that we looked into in that sector. Let's see.
David, can you talk to the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule that will be rolled out in Colorado in 23 through 25?
Yes. So this is a rule that EPA requires all public water systems that serve a population of 3,300 people or more, and they have to test for all the PFAS compounds that can be tested, and there's 29 of them. And then lithium is also on that list. So we're going to get more information about lithium. And this is a contaminant or compound we don't know, is it of concern or even at what levels, but this is an effort to just get more information to see if it's even showing up in our drinking water. So that's the monitoring that's going to happen starting in 2023 nationwide. And all of this information as it comes in is available to the public through EPA's website.
Okay, looks like we're going back to the hands. I think we've cleared the specific questions about this in the chat, though. If I missed something, by all means,
oh, thanks. Yeah,
throw a hand up and jump in. But Bonnie, go ahead and go next. Oh, we got
Bonnie.
There you
go. Just in case Joan is in a hurry, your hand up was up before mine. Do you want to? Okay, you okay?
No, do it.
All right. My question to you, David, this was a very good presentation, and may we have a copy of the slides? Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, well, thank you. I know I took up probably a lot more of your meeting time than I was allotted, but I appreciate the interest and allowing me to do this. And I'm happy to share my slides.
Well, I appreciate it, and it was very well done. And the second question I have for you is, if I'm understanding correctly, the grants that can be received by the community, those are for private wells?
Yeah, so there's kind of two ways that you could apply for the grant money. The easiest would probably be to just let anyone with a private well in the area know about this program, and they can just individually sign up. The other thing that you could do is have more of an organized kind of application. And so you could go in and kind of apply as a organization or a group and just say, in total, we have this many wells or waters that we would like to test. So that would be another option for testing.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get at here is, I think I'm hearing that we would have probably not have standing with the agencies to apply for this grant to accomplish the testing off the Superfund site like we've been asking for by using this grant funds. Is that correct?
I mean, if there was interest or so to test this site, you could work with that and then work with the city or someone to submit a request or an application for that, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay,
Um,
but we would still have to have the permission of the agencies to move forward on this.
yes, yeah.
Whereas with our private wells, with a group or just an individual, we could do it individually and the state will have people that will help walk us through it. But if we wanted to get the testing done, say like at a Superfund site and an offsite plume on private property, then we probably would have to go through the state and EPA to get approval.
Yeah, I guess, you know, this wouldn't, yeah, once that site, if it was identified for sampling, you could have it done through this grant program, but we're not requiring sampling through this grant program, if that makes sense.
Right.
So you couldn't just, you know, through an application, just say, I want to test every this and this on these private properties throughout the state.
Okay.
But if there was interest from there or however that sampling was happening, if it was okay to get that sample, then it could be covered through this grant program.
Okay. I'm understanding better. I'll take a little bit more time. Thank you for your help.
Yep. But the most exciting thing here is, you know, it kind of saves a step. I mean, typically testing can take a while. And then if we do find something at a site, you know, and then we do an analysis and then we see, well, okay, there could be a concern at these private wells, or there's a, you know, public water system sources. Then we go back in and do additional testing to see what those levels are. And this is an opportunity to kind of skip that beginning step and immediately just go, okay, what is my exact exposure through my water? And you can immediately get that tested through this grant program. And we're hoping to get information statewide by doing that. If we get enough, you know, just through participation and testing all the drinking water and stuff that's used in our state, we can kind of figure out, okay, where else could there be risks in some of this, get information that way.
Okay, I got Joan and then Tom.
We have a question that's been asked twice in the chat from Sonia. She's asking, will CDPHE also be expanding this public health effort to other endocrine disrupting chemicals in the water, like blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, I was saving the non-PFAS ones until we got to the end, but go ahead.
Well, she's asked twice. No, it's okay.
Yeah, right now that this program is, we can only test for PFAS.
Okay.
But there might be other funding opportunities in that out there elsewhere. And as we find out, there might be similar things set up for other contaminants in the future. But right now, this program is limited to PFAS.
Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Joan and Tom.
You know, again, I am thinking about what just recently happened with the DOE finding out that there's PFAS at Rocky Flats. And this is, and an FBI agent was even looking at this situation and didn't get a good response from CDPHE, but CDPHE, I apologize, EPA, CDPHE would shoot me, EPA, and they are claiming to the DOE that they will include it in the 5-year review. They had made a mistake some time ago and said, oh no, Rocky Flats doesn't have any problems with PFAS. Finding out they do. They claim it the 70 PPT. You know, I think that's an interesting piece too, that if there's over 9,000 PFAS chemicals that are related to all of this, and we have picked 26, and we still, in the country with the most number of sites that have been confirmed, that we are really moving real slow, and I'm glad to see the grant. But if I was, Bonnie, don't watch this one. If I was sitting next to Lowry landfill, knowing what we know about Lowry landfill, I would absolutely be very concerned that the EPA concluded a 5-year review just recently, and they've been aware that we've got PFAS situations, and Rocky Flats is a closed Superfund site, right? And we have an operable unit that is in, that's why I wondered about your institutional controls and a follow-up at Lowry for any of the closed sites, because it is the center of Rocky Flats where the industrial dumping is, and it's buried underground. And a very famous soil sampler said, we got problems. Teflon was used, not as a frying pan at Rocky Flats. So I'm just saying, I would be wondering, why did they just leave out one of the worst landfills probably in the country? And people can jump all over me. You know, I can't totally confront this. It was bad. So my sense is, why did EPA, who doesn't want to show up here, I guess I got to make that phone call. But we do have the EPA person on the phone. Is she still there?
Yeah.
Where are you?
Yeah, she's here. Yeah, go ahead, Joan.
Okay. Well, anyway, that's what I'm saying is, while they don't want to be here, I just know that the 5-year review is pretty shocking with a particular site like this, when you've got 9,000 chemicals and it was a chemical dump, that nobody wants to take a look at that, because it is admitted by CDPHE. They absolutely know landfills are a big site that they are concerned about, and with surface water, groundwater moving. And I'm just telling you, that was one of the targeted sites that they are concerned about. So to say that the community may have to do their own sampling, that's alarming to me. But thanks for listening to me on that one. And I do talk fast, sorry.
I just wanted to have a chance to just respond. So when we were planning this agenda meeting with Bonnie and Tom, they had indicated that they did not want to hear about the 5-year review from EPA. So if that's something that you would like to hear from EPA about in the future, the most recent 5-year review, we're happy to present those. Just let us know.
Okay, Tom.
Thanks. Yeah, and I guess really quick, I did just want to mention, Joan, you mentioned just all the PFAS and all that, and we're looking at kind of 2 of these are a limited amount. There are EPA and others are looking at, do we regulate these things as a class or different groups? There's a lot of research going on to expanding what we can test for and doing almost like a total fluorine analysis to get a better picture of what all is out there. So there's a lot of stuff happening to actually get better information. And then, we're pretty much sitting on all of this information. And then anytime we get new kind of health effects information or studies or things we can use, health advisories, we're going to comb through everything we've collected and kind of reevaluate and see if there's any risk as we get information in. So this isn't kind of a one and done and you're okay or not okay at this moment in time, but moving forward, we are going to be, keep reevaluating and doing that. That Bridget mentions 9,000 PFAS and stuff. So, we're learning a lot more, and there's like 1,000 studies happening each year on this stuff. So there's so much going on. And I guess really quick, there was one, I'm having a hard time. Oh, we could take a question. Oh, Bridget also had a question just in the chat. Did Denver Water test for these? And Denver Water did test their treated water, just like Aurora, for these, and they were non-detect in their treated water. And it looked like, I think, I don't know, Mike, if you know, Tom.
Yeah.
David, could I just ask, did they test their recycled water that comes from the waste treatment plant?
They're doing some extensive testing that might be worth reaching out to them. this is only testing that was done through our state like effort, but there's a lot of other testing. So it might be worth reaching out to them to see, on a particular water or a source if you're interested. Because
They
I know
wanted
they
a
are
lot of
doing.
money for that information.
Okay.
So if you guys have any of it, it'd be nice to have.
I don't, unfortunately. I think
Okay,
Tom.
now Tom.
Hi, this is Tom Kraus with the CAG. First of all, David, I want to say I appreciate your open and free discussion and interchange, and it's very refreshing, and thank you.
You're welcome.
What my question is related to checking PFAS in groundwater. In December of 2001, EPA in addressing groundwater said that it recommended using a screening level 40 nanograms per liter to determine if PFOAs or PFOS is present in each site. And EPA is refusing to do any testing at this point at Lowry until they get a PQL from central office or whatever. So I appreciate your testing of groundwater, and what I'm wondering is if there's a plume that was created for 1,4-dioxane when it was going through the treatment plant and they didn't know it was a contaminant of concern. PFAS if it was in the water at the same time, it would have gone into that same plume because it wasn't considered a contaminant of concern. That plume is 3 miles north all the way up to Mississippi Avenue. That means it follows Murphy Creek. So could the Murphy Creek residents ask you to, even though their drinking water is not from Murphy Creek, can they ask you, can we test the water that's going through their community and their golf courses and so on, can we test that water as groundwater for PFAS? And there's another home that is being tested regularly that's right in the middle of the plume. Can that landowner say, can you test any groundwater I have, not just my well water, which is much deeper, but groundwater to see if I've got PFAS there, maybe coming out in my lettuce or whatever?
Yes, yeah, for sure. If there is a well on that property that's private property, and they would like to have that tested, especially if they're using that on vegetables or irrigation, definitely encourage them to sign up. That is something we can test, as well as that kind of surface water, Murphy's Creek or something you mentioned. That's something else we can test through this grant program. So those are great examples of things that we would love to see kind of get tested through this opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I got Bonnie and Margie and Richard. It all looked the same to me when it popped up. So Bonnie, go ahead.
Okay,
Margie,
thank you.
Mhm.
Joan, you asked a question about, was the 5-year review already discussed? This 5-year review, the CAG has been commenting on for 2 years. And we have disagreed with the final decision. We disagreed all along. We don't know what we're supposed to talk about now because EPA said that they have the authority, they're the final voice, and this is where it is. And we've got these issues with PFAS that we want to get onto. We want to start investigating alternative technologies, which our record of decision allows us to do, to talk about what alternative technologies might be used to address this site versus containment, which we know is the cheapest, not the best sort of technology. And we've been working on containing it for almost 40 years. And so we decided as a CAG, we didn't want to talk about the same thing over and over again. We want to move on and try and get on with deciding what we can do to remove the threat. And so they have been acting in public as though they've tried so hard with us and we just don't want to, and they're right. They have told us for the past 2 years that our concerns about how legal the conceptual site model and other things were, they just said, you know, we understand what you're saying, but we're the final decision maker. That's it. We're done. And so if you want to talk about it after it's signed off on, then we'll talk to you. We don't see what good that's going to do now. We don't see what it's going to accomplish. We would like to start accomplishing something at Lowry that helps us to understand and get rid of the risk. So that's the answer to that, Joe. And we've been talking about it, commenting on it for over 2 years. And we don't see where it's going to go. We just don't know what talking about it will do. So I hope that explains it, but that's why we don't want to talk about it at this meeting. We want to move on and get some positive things done.
Okay, Margie.
Thank you. And thank you, David. As everyone else has said, this was a really good presentation. And I do want to springboard off of some of the stuff that Tom talked about. And I realize that your primary focus is drinking water, but it's great that you're also wanting to look at other things. And I am one of those Murphy Creek homeowners who's living with this plume in my neighborhood. And we have asked repeatedly to have our sump pumps, the water that's coming up from our sumps, tested. And of course, EPA doesn't think that there's any volatilization, or however that word is pronounced, coming into our homes from the sumps. But we live right near the landfill. It seems as though there's an awful lot of PFAS over there, or the likelihood is great. And some of that groundwater could be seeping into our homes. So I'm wondering if that's something that might work with this program. And then the second thing is there is a ton of development that's happening right next to that landfill. And unfortunately, most of this development is also being approved administratively. So we really don't have an option or an opportunity in a public setting to talk about these things. And it seems like a lot of those homes are going to be built right in the path of what could be a very serious problem. So I guess I just want to bring that up and see if we can keep that on people's radar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I can at least talk about the testing that you're mentioning. So, you know, we could test Murphy's Creek that runs through there, and that's interesting. I haven't heard about testing kind of a like a sump pump or something like that, but that's definitely something that we can test through this program. So that's, I mean, kind of great outside of the box thinking, and something that, yeah, please sign up and fill out that form just with that testing.
Okay, Richard.
Yeah, a real quick question on non-detect. So what value sets the non-detect? Say, for instance, you test and it comes up 69 parts per trillion. Does that mean it's non-detect? Does that mean it's not there? Or what? What do you do with that?
No, that's a great question. So kind of the 70 parts per trillion is purely when we get the two compounds that we have the most health info back on, PFOA and PFOS. Those are added together to compare to 70 parts per trillion. But what we're sharing on our website is at the lowest level that a lab can even detect this stuff. And this is, you know, down below 1 part per trillion even. And so there's a lot of states that are collecting PFAS information, and what they're sharing is what the reporting level of the lab is, which is usually at a couple parts per trillion. We're sharing out information at the lowest detectable level from the lab, even if it's below the official reporting limit. So what we're kind of sharing info on is, you know, at the lowest possible level.
Well, that's wonderful. It's wonderful news, because all we hear is around Lowry landfill is, oh no, it's non-detect. It's non-detect. And values are set even higher than the state requires. And if it's below that, it's non-detect. And that word, those two words, non-detect, stink. They really do. but you explained what you all do, which is great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, John, you're up next, and then Karen wants to get in.
Bonnie, don't get upset with me. I am really, my husband. I right now am concerned, and Bonnie, I'll do this offline. I will find out why EPA, as you're saying, have taken the position that they did not want to mention PFAS in the 5-year review. I mean, this isn't anything they haven't found or has been a concern. It's been a concern for years. And again, I understand where you're going with this. It's over, but for some of us, it may not be over, just because it's very important about citizens advisory groups that when you have a question, it needs to be answered. And so I would like to find out from you, Bonnie, was that ever in writing, that they absolutely said in writing that they would not test for PFAS now at the Lowry landfill? And to hear someone talking about a sump pump or Murphy Creek, et cetera, I would think that would be a preliminary assessment that somebody ought to be taking a look at in that area quickly. And again, that's my own opinion.
Okay, Karen?
Yeah, I just wanted to address Margie's concern. I wanted to let you all know that Sean Leesky from Aurora Water has moved on to greener pastures. And so he is, I don't have him anymore, and I don't have a person assigned, but I wanted to let you know that when I figure out who to talk to about this, that is our property on the golf course where Murphy Creek and some of those ponds, that I will bring it up and I will report back to you. So I'm hearing you, but I don't have anybody to talk to just yet in Aurora Water. So I'll just wanted to let you know, I'll get back to you. So thanks.
I just wanted to jump in real quick, just in response to Joan, actually. Joan, we did send a letter in response to the CAG's formal letter requesting PFAS sampling and information about PFAS at the Lowry landfill site. We sent that, I believe, in late January. I don't know if that's been shared with you or not. I'm kind of guessing no. But if it's up to the CAG whether they would like to share our response regarding PFAS with anyone else.
We'll be happy to share the letter. What we want to do first is have a work study session. We want to have a work study session with the CAG where we can discuss it among ourselves and what the next step is. I have no problem sharing it with Joan because the letter, again, does not indicate that we're going to get any satisfaction for a while. And it's rather disturbing to us. So be happy to share that with Joan. I'll be happy to share it with anybody that would like to see it. We just haven't had a work study to discuss it and come to our own conclusions and what our bottom line is. Once we've done that, probably in the next week, then we will share it with anybody that wants to see it. No problem.
Gotcha, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that we can't, I can't share that response with anyone other than the CAG.
Isn't it public record? Isn't it a public
record? Maybe it is.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe you're right. I guess, Joan, I could share it with you.
Yeah.
It was on the list of documents that Dustin sent out for things that have been filed at CDPHE. So you can just send that link.
Yep. Or Joan, you can go to CDPHE. They got a wonderful reference library and the response is there if you want that. If you'd rather have it from me personally, I'll be happy to send it to you.
Tom?
CDPHE has a great list of documents that have been put on the record, and Dustin was very good. And I have to say, I'm very sorry Dustin is gone. We wish him well in his new endeavors. One more link in our chain where our historical knowledge is gone. And now we have to bring somebody new in who's going to have to learn it all and can't possibly do it. And we're really sorry for that. But we wish Dustin well. He was a good person.
Hi.
Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
In answer to what the letter said, basically said, and we'll be glad to share the whole thing to you, but it says, until PFAS are designated as a CERCLA hazardous substance, the EPA's CERCLA authorities are limited. And with respect to the connection between PFAS and the Lowry landfill site, the EPA remains confident in the integrity of the existing remedy. And the existing remedy is containment, and yet they have a 3-mile plume north of the site. So that may help you understand.
Other questions for David, who's been very generous with his time tonight? Last questions for him? And anything I missed from the chat as it was rolling past that didn't get it?
I went back through the chat. I did notice I didn't address one part of, I think, Sonia's question. She was asking just kind of about, why oil and gas and them being exempted, where they can still purchase PFAS foam. And this was kind of before my time, but looking at other states like California and some of these others that are taking similar steps, there's most states that have put a ban in place do allow exemptions for oil and gas. So it seems to be something that is showing up in other states that are actively doing these kinds of measures. But I think what the reasoning being is just the fire and the intensity that can happen at some of these oil refineries and in these sites is why there's that exemption, so they can still use a foam that's military kind of spec'd out, where they know they can put out these fires quickly. But at least talking to the ones in Colorado, they are all excited, to be switching off of this stuff. And so we're going to hopefully be able to expand our take back program, and we're looking at steps that we can take as well to help support some of these other industries and kind of take that foam out of service and get it kind of behind lock and key until we can dispose of it.
Okay, Paula.
Yes, thank you. David, I want to add my appreciation to everyone else's appreciation of your slideshow and what we've discussed. And without my having to go back through all of it and listen to the recording again, would you please remind me how you came to how the EPA came to the 70 parts per trillion number as opposed to some other number?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the health advisory kind of process is they'll look through and make sure that, look at the studies that are out there for contaminants, make sure they're peer reviewed and do a lot kind of thorough vetting of the studies that they're using. And then part of setting up the health advisory is once you have the health study with the health effect at a level, then it's kind of what portion of that contaminant is coming from a source. And in this case, it's drinking water as opposed to food or other exposure routes. And then also it takes into account kind of the actual person kind of receiving that. So are you looking at using like a small child or a grown adult where their intake of water would be very different and their body weights as well. So the portion of kind of who they are is made up a lot more of what what they're bringing in. So all those factors are taken into account when they put together a health advisory.
So is that health advisory the same as a risk assessment?
No. So essentially we'll get a toxicity value, and then EPA will take steps to take a toxic value, and then add in all those other factors to come up with a health assessment or a health advisory. And they've got a lot of different PFAS compounds that they have on their list that they will be issuing health advisories for and providing toxicity information. And so we're keeping a close eye on, as these are getting released, we're going to constantly look at all of our levels statewide to see if we have any kind of areas at risk.
Thank you.
Yep.
Tom, something new?
Yes, I have another question, David. Is there any concern in the state of Colorado or is your department even looking at the fact that PFASs are being used to frack with? And then that water that comes up that has PFAS in them are then being injected into the ground for disposal and maybe contaminating some of our biggest aquifers?
Yeah, so that's, I mean, that's where we're trying to get a lot more information. So we have done testing a lot. Fortunately, a lot of our water providers in Weld County, some of these areas where we do have a lot of kind of oil and gas operations, they have tested their drinking water. And a lot of them, some of them are showing up as non-detect or at low levels, but we still want to just get as much information as we can from anyone with private wells or irrigation water to see, you know, what levels are showing up and that. So it's still an area that we're just trying to get more information to better assess potential impacts, if there are any.
But I guess there's then no interest in stopping the oil and gas industry from using PFAS in their fracking.
I don't know. I mean, it's being looked at like along with other products. And right now we're just seeing if there's an exposure from that, I guess, if that's helpful. I mean, the Glide dental floss I used last night had PFAS in it. In a lot of these products, you know, I just saw something the other day, Patagonia coats and all of this outerwear, all of these things, you know, have been tested and a lot of them are showing up with PFAS. And so what we're trying to do is just better understand is what is the exposure or anything coming off of these products. And so similar to the fracking fluids and some of these, we're just trying to get more information on that. And at least through this grant program, we have an opportunity now to test a lot of groundwater near these sites to get a better idea of if anything's coming off into our aquifers.
Thank you.
Okay, Bonnie, you coming back in?
This is all I'm going to say tonight, but Joan, when you asked about, have we talked about the 5-year review, I just want to point out that the paragraph that Tom read to you is exactly the answers we always get from EPA when we have serious concerns. And that's why we said we didn't want to talk about the 5-year review, because no matter how serious or how much information we have to back up what we're worried about, it's always, well, we don't have to do it right now. And so that's been our problem with the 5-year review, and that's why we don't want to talk about it.
Okay, anything else for David in particular or on this subject? Paula, do you have a new one? Is that a remnant hand? All done? Okay. David, thanks. Much appreciated to have you here tonight.
Yeah, well, thank you all. I was expecting just kind of given a half-hour window or so, and it just, yeah, excited to see just the interest in this topic, and hopefully, yeah, there's a lot of interest to take advantage of this opportunity for testing and to get more information. So thank you all, and yeah, be in touch with questions, and I'll share my presentation with you all.
Thank you. It was really excellent. We learned a lot. And we appreciate your attitude with us, where you were just willing to have an open and good discussion, and we learned from you, and that's what we're looking for. Thank you.
Okay.
Take care, everyone.
Our last agenda item on the agenda is just conversation about March and topics going forward. So Bonnie, I know there was some possibility of the presentation from an outside experts in March. Don't know if you have other thoughts about March and other topics that could be on the March agenda in addition to that one, or if that won't be ready.
Well, I took from today's meeting and the fact that EPA would not come to this meeting because it wasn't pertinent to their goal. Thank you, Meg, for coming. I understand you're with EPA, but you know, you're not one of the decision makers that can tell us, yeah, we can try this new technology. Yeah, let's just give it a try. you know, that's not your role. So sorry if it's like we're ignoring that you're here. We know you're here, but the decision makers aren't here. So I would like to continue talking to some of the companies I'm talking with, and one in particular right now. The last one I've been talking to that I've told the group about is a company that could destroy PFAS. A lot of information there that we went along with a lot of what David said tonight. It was excellent. But I'm talking now to somebody who treats dioxane. And since dioxane is known to be at Lowry landfill and in the offsite plume, I'm wondering if EPA would be interested if we can get that company come and tell us how they take care of dioxane. At this point, I don't have them nailed down. This site is a scary site to come talk to people about. This is a very political site. And some of these companies have some really good technology, some really good information, but this is a tough site to bust. So can we talk about that at our planning meeting? If we can talk about the dioxane, I would, if I can get that person to come and talk to us, I would like to be able to present this technology. It sounds interesting and it sounds like it might work. We'd like to know more about it. I don't know if EPA will be interested in this one. Tom, do you have any suggestions at this point in time, or do you want to wait and talk about it later?
I don't have any other suggestions at this point in time. Thank you.
Okay, so I just need to clarify, Michael. I need to clarify now. We, as a CAG, at a meeting like this, are not allowed to ask CDPHE about the testing at Gun Club Road. Is that on Gun Club Estates? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the venue for conversations with Gun Club Estates is Gun Club Estates, not the Lowry, is what I heard Colleen say, but I don't, she's here. I don't have to speak for her.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
I just want to be sure. We have some people who are from Gun Club Estates listening tonight, and some are going to watch the Zoom meeting on YouTube. And I just wanted to be clear that those of us that are working on this and have brought this issue to the fore are being told it's none of our business what happens with that testing.
That's not what we're saying, Bonnie. It is absolutely something we want to talk to the community about if there's interest. This is just not the forum. So we're happy to talk to the folks that are impacted. We don't have anything to tell them yet because we haven't collected samples, but that's what Shannon is going to be working with us on, is outreach to the community, discussion when we have results back. Just this is not the forum because this forum is specific to Lowry landfill issues, and the sampling is a separate regulatory process. And so it's just not appropriate to have that discussion in this forum. We're absolutely open to talking to the community about it. So don't get the idea that we're not.
Well, I do have that idea because I would like to point out that it may not have anything to do with Lowry Landfill Superfund site CAG, who has brought up many concerns about offsite impacts. But I would like to bring up the fact that it was because of the offsite plume and all of the closeness to 1,000 feet from Gun Club Estates boundaries. And so to us, this is a forum to discuss it. Now, if you said to me, we don't want to give out the individual names and addresses if we find something, that's fine with us. Those people are friends of ours, they're our neighbors, and we'll talk to them anyway. It's just sad that we're the ones that brought this up. It's because of us that sampling's gone on. We've been working with these people and we'd like to know what happens. We're hoping for the best, but I don't see why this forum isn't the forum to be talking about the testing that's going to be going on. That's exactly what I was talking about with the 5-year review. This is what we've gotten all along. So that's my complaint. I'll be quiet now. And if we could have some time to talk, Michael, about the next meeting, I think I would like to talk about the 1,4-dioxane technology. I think that would be something good, but I'm sure there's something else that's important too. We need some time to think about it because tonight's meeting is kind of shocking, to be honest with you.
Okay, so Bonnie, I think if I got it right, you said earlier that the CAG is going to meet to talk about the letters and to talk about tonight. And so do you want our agenda setting meeting to come after that?
It would help. We'll have a meeting this next week,
Okay.
and that gives you time, don't you think? Gives you 3
Yeah, I think
weeks.
that sequence makes sense to me, that you all should confer and talk among yourselves, and then so we can set our meeting with you and me and Janine and Meg and Tom for after you meet. So we'll do that, and then that will help us construct agenda going forward.
And Shannon.
And Andrea too?
And Shannon.
Shannon.
So when's your work group meeting, Bonnie?
Probably next Friday, probably, if we can all get together, it'll probably be next Friday.
Okay.
Good. So I'll send out some dates after that.
Understand, I just want to let you know that Shannon will be taking this site for me while I'm out on medical leave starting the 10th. So I'm just gauging how things go.
We wish you well, Janine.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so Sonia, do you want to just turn on your mic and ask this question rather than have me just read it? Is that okay? I just think you'll do better justice to it than I will.
Maybe you could remind her how to unmute on the phone.
Okay.
She mentioned she has no audio input.
Oh,
so.
no audio. Okay. So the question is for Janine and Colleen. You can see it in the chat. This is a question about being contacted by Taylor Pierce related to an injection well that's 6 miles from the Superfund site, and Sonia's trying to understand whether there's department communication and coordination around these different things that are happening around the site. So let me just give you the floor. You can read it.
There is department coordination and discussion. It's just above my head, so I'm not privy to it. And so what I would suggest that if you have questions related to that injection well, that you reach out to Taylor, and to the extent she needs to pull in her management, that's the proper way to go, because I don't know the details of any of it. I just know that it's a solid waste program issue, and that they are discussing between the folks at the department that have decisions to be made about it. So it's just not something I'm involved with at all.
But with your background, Colleen, I bet you have the capacity to have a pretty good idea.
Actually, I don't. I mean, I never dealt with oil and gas waste issues or any of that. So yeah, I understand groundwater and how wells work and all that, but I haven't been involved in the discussion, so I really don't know what's going on with it. Other than the fact that I believe there are multiple agencies involved in the decision, not just CDPHE. So there's some, who's got authority for what piece, and that's the part I don't really understand that much.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right. So that takes care of our last agenda item. Joni, if you have a final thought, and then Bonnie and Tom will give you the last word.
Colleen, would you accept a telephone call to so I can ask, or an email direct to you? You did bring it up at this meeting. It is news to me, but you did bring up gun barrel. And so my curiosity is certainly up. And will you be able to comment? You are going in there for a reason, and it's got to be on paper. So I don't want to request a FOIA.
So Joan, our community involvement person for that site is Shannon.
Can I call you? Will you allow me to call you?
I would like you to work through Shannon. Joan, I would like you to work through Shannon. That's how we're managing that project.
So what are you saying? I can ask a technical question to Shannon? I've never had CDPHE technical people usually are very open to a question.
Joan, we don't have any data yet. We have no data yet.
I don't care about
really
your
answer
data.
a technical
Okay,
question.
apologies. I don't care about your data. I care about the presentation, the comments that you have made tonight, and said, even though you brought it up, And now I do have.
I
no, you
brought
don't
it
have
up
to say a
because it was
thing. Colleen, you
requested
don't
by
have
the
to-
CAG.
Right, you don't have to say anything. My request was, you're saying I cannot.
Contact
ask for
Shannon.
Direct, let me
That's
finish.
that's my
Let me
response.
finish. Can I finish? You don't even have to comment. I would like to speak to someone that may be in the know of why, and I'll ask, certainly Meg, I think that's appropriate, but maybe she can explain why that it was brought up here, number one. Number two, now it's piqued my interest. Number three, and what does CDPHE, you don't have to answer this, how does CDPHE, how are they working with a community? Nothing should be behind closed doors, and you're giving me the impression that you got directives somewhere. And that's what I'm wanting to learn about. What directive moved you to, inspired CDPHE to be involved with Gun Club in the first place and do sampling? Was that a preliminary assessment, et cetera? So I will get my questions to Meg.
So let me
and
give
then
you some
Colleen, don't
background,
have to
Joan,
say anything.
since you haven't been following this because you clearly are coming in out of the cold.
I think
CAG
everybody
asked-
here is in the cold. Is that
Let me
right?
give you the background. The rest of them know this, so let me answer your question.
Oh, okay.
And then,
Thank you.
and then we'll let Tom and Bonnie wrap. So Colleen,
So-
finish up.
The CAG asked EPA to sample for 1,4-dioxane in this area under the Lowry landfill program. 4 specific well owners wrote letters. EPA made the determination that it wasn't something that could be done under the Superfund program. They referred those requests to the site assessment program at EPA. And that site assessment program at EPA is run by CDPHE. So we are doing this work under the site assessment program that we get grant funding through EPA for. We have done a preliminary assessment. The report is available to the public. It's been out there for probably a year. I don't remember how long ago we did it. And the next step is sampling, which is what we're undertaking now. The reason that I updated the CAG tonight is because the ongoing request to keep them posted on when the sampling is going to happen. And that's something I committed to way back. So that's what I did tonight. And that's the reason that I did it tonight, is to let them know the sampling was going to happen. The intent was never to go into the weeds in what all's happening, because that is a different process than Lowry landfill. It's the site assessment program of EPA. It has nothing to do with the Lowry landfill CERCLA process.
Right now.
That's why they're separate. And again, the only reason I even brought it up at this CAG is because it's been an ongoing ask from the CAG to be kept up to date when the sampling would finally be done, because we had put it on hold because of COVID. So that's why I brought it up. And that's the only reason I brought it up.
Okay, Tom and Bonnie, last things that you need from tonight's venue?
Tom, do you have anything that you need to say?
I would like to say, and I understand CDPHE is trying to keep things separate from EPA. The CAG didn't point out that the 6 wells or 5 wells that were put in order to determine that the plume was not going into Gun Club Estates were inadequate, and we gave two different technical articles that showed how you should evaluate to see whether or not a plume is going beyond a certain point, and they were rejected by the EPA. So at such point is when, if there, and I hope not, if there is 1,4-dioxane found in Gun Club Estates, and then there's got to be a search made for the source. The CAG will come back and reassert the possibility that it comes from the plume based on that ground. And you'll be hearing from us again at that point.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I would like to, once again, I want to thank CDPHE for having David here tonight. He was excellent. We learned a lot, and I think the CAG gained a lot from it. And I appreciate everybody's comments and questions tonight. I hope that future meetings, I hope that EPA will take their responsibility a little more seriously and realize that the CAG is the Lowry Landfill Superfund Site CAG. And just because we have issues with offsite areas, which do have issues from the Lowry Landfill Superfund Site, that we really have to realize that working towards a solution is better than just continuing on after 40 years watching the containment fail. So we're really anxious for that. We really reach out to EPA and hope. We'd like to reach out to Waste Management as well, because we know as operator of the site, especially under this PFAS issue, we're going to have to be talking a little bit about Waste Management's operating procedures. And so we'd like to have that opportunity, and we hope that EPA will allow that at some point. So that's it for tonight. And I want to thank everybody that was here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bonnie. Night all.